Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now to a story that's been dominating the headlines lately, and that's the key UN climate change talks that are coming up in Glasgow, Scotland this weekend. They're now less than 48 hours away, in fact, with world leaders hoping to strike a deal capable of fending off the worst effects of global warming. Countries, rich and poor, will face increasingly tough choices, while a country like Denmark, for instance, is considered to be at the forefront of efforts to wean its population off fossil fuels. Many African countries are said to not be making much progress at all. Many of them, of course, part of the southern hemisphere, and we know that this region of the world has been hardest hit by the effects of global warming, while some of them are least responsible for the world's emissions. So from that point of view, what are the biggest problems of climate change and what are the possible solutions? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by Ronke Olubamishe, who is from the Environment Facility of the United Nations Development Programme. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Charles, for having me.
Now, I guess by now most people have a rough idea of what COP26 is. I mean, we all know it's an important climate summit, but many people still have quite a number of questions, and one of them would have to be, why is COP26 important for Africa?
Thank you very much again for having me. Well, COP26 is very important, not only for Africa, but for the whole world, but especially for Africa because of our peculiarities. Most of African countries are developing nations, and many of the African countries still depend on fossil fuel. And of course, we know the effect of fossil fuel on the environment, on the climate. That is what we call global warming. And so the idea of the COP, which is the Conference of the Parties, the 26th of it, is to come together, the head of states and the important people in the whole, about 200 countries coming together to discuss, okay, which way forward. So, and then to come to agreements, what you are going to do, each country, what they are going to do, to just address this very important issue. We can't afford to lay back. We can't afford to push it under the rug again, the carpet again. It is not done. I mean, we have some countries, I think I mentioned some time ago, we have some countries, we call them small island developing states. I know of a particular country that is trying to buy land in another country because the land that they have is being eroded by sea level rise, for example. So it's just urgent that the whole world needs to just sit down and do something about it.
And in terms of what COP26 actually means, I think you mentioned it. It translates as Conference of Parties. Yes. And the number 26 represents the fact that it is the 26th meeting, and the first one took place in 1995, if I'm reading it right. And these are parties to the United Nations Convention on Climate Change.
Yes, yes. So the parties, the idea is, like I mentioned before, it's like the
and every country is a party to that convention, is it? Or are there countries that are not?
We have countries coming in and going out.
Right.
I remember the time of Trump. You remember America?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It was really a big case that time when Trump was like, no, he was not going to be part of it. Pulled out America out of it. So it is not actually all the countries that are parts to it. Some are still watching from the sidelines, some are, and then each country has a different level of commitments to the agreements that has been made there. We have those who have ratified the agreements, we have those who are still watching, we have those who are like, look, we can't do away with our fossil fuel. This is still part of what we're using to develop our economy, and so we have countries at different levels.
Well, I'm going to get to that bit about fossil fuels, because obviously it affects countries like Nigeria, for example. But this has essentially been a yearly journey to find out how dangerous climate change is and to find a way of reducing greenhouse gases which are blamed for causing global warming.
Yes. The greenhouse gases, well, maybe I will just explain it in a layman language. It's like we have, I'll try, we have the ray of the sun that is coming from the sun, and then it's hitting the Earth's surface, and then the carbon dioxide that is, okay, when it hits the Earth's surface, the idea, the normal thing is for part of it to be reflected back into the atmosphere. But now with the concentration, higher concentration of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and all these methane gases in the atmosphere, they have the capacity, they have the property of trapping heat. And so when they trap this heat, the amount of the reflection that is supposed to go back to the sun up into the atmosphere is not. And then of course these chemicals, they trap the heat and then they release it, and then they make the lower atmosphere to be hot. And so it is the idea of, look, we have to do something about it. Some of the causes, of course, we know, the fossil fuels.
Yes, I was going to say, first of all, I mean, this is one of the best explanations I've ever heard. And as you said, you were putting it in layperson's terms, and I'm a layperson. So, I mean, I've listened to all kinds of scientists and things, but this is, you know, with all, you know, honesty, one of the best explanations, very simply put, and much easier to understand. And the main reason why global temperatures that you just described so well are increasing, is that because of human activity or natural causes or both?
Well, I stand to be corrected. I always tell people that even what we call natural disasters, are they really natural disasters? No, as far as I'm concerned. Because what happened is that human activities over time accumulates. Of course, most of the things we do, we don't get the results immediately. So when, like fossil fuel, it's accumulation of organic matter over thousands of years,
decades.
Exactly, yeah, that we're now extracting. And so it's the same thing with what we call the effect of global warming that we're having now. There is really nothing, I mean, there's hardly what you really call natural disaster as far as global warming is concerned. All anthropogenic human activities, building, energy, road construction, clearing of forests, it's also a major, in fact, it's a major.
And that's because?
Because, okay, simply also put, the oxygen that we breathe in, we breathe out carbon dioxide. The oxygen that we breathe in is what plants breathe out.
Yes.
And the carbon dioxide that we breathe out is what plants take in. And then when the carbon dioxide are now there,
and the plants are not breathing it in.
And the plants are no longer there. The trees are no longer there because we're cutting them down.
Very
so
interesting.
Of course we have that. And so it's majorly human activities that
right.
is
And is it the, I mean, you mentioned the cutting down of trees, logging and that sort of thing. Yes. But fossil fuels, as you said, they when you dig them out of the earth, and we use them in cars and aeroplanes and all that sort of thing, it increases the temperature.
Okay.
But it doesn't go further than that, does it? Because I'm trying to get my head around the amount of fossil fuels that would have had to, that we have injected into the atmosphere. Because I mean, we only started really using fossil fuels not that long ago. I mean, on a mass level, with cars and planes and all. I mean, when did planes start flying, for example?
Exactly. If you say that, I agree with you. But what you find out now is that, okay, if we are using it for this, I mean, quote and unquote, short period of time, and we are having this effect, population is increasing, and technology is improving. And one thing I also like to let people know is that whatever we call technology improvement, you see, whoever, majority of this technology improvement, whoever comes up to bring this, they only emphasize the good part of it to you. Take, for example, paracetamol. Nobody tells you that paracetamol can affect your liver. So most of these things, yes, we embrace the good part of it, but the side effects of these things, they always come back to
That's
haunt
a good
us.
point.
So that is what is happening.
And so this is why there are efforts to make sure that global temperatures do not rise beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius or centigrade above pre-industrial times.
Yes. In fact, now it is to make sure it doesn't go beyond 2%. And then as much as possible to beat it down to at least 1.5 or below 1.5, because the implication is massive. Sea level rise, the icebergs will be melting, and then of course sea level rise. I mentioned all the states. We had a small documentary by Channel 4. They came to Nigeria the other day, and they were in
That's
Lagos.
the UK's Channel 4 television.
Yes,
right.
and they went to Lagos. You can see the schools that have been eroded away, the businesses that have been eroded away close to the beach. And now those communities are no longer there. They are not. They don't have any other means of.
So that's why this is so urgent.
It is very, very urgent and very important.
And there have been 26 conferences. Most people don't really remember every single one, but the one that many people remember is Paris 2015. Which was very big news at the time. Just remind us of what happened there and the agreement that was reached and the commitments that were made.
Well, the commitments were not so different from what we have now. It's maybe probably just an improvement or to what we had before. The main goal is reduce global temperature as much as we can, so that we'll be able to continue to live and enjoy our life here on Earth. And that is it. Business as usual cannot go ahead.
And it's a bigger problem for young people, because they're the ones who are going to still be alive in a few decades from now.
Not only the young people, but also the communities and the poor people, those marginalized marginalized communities, because they are forced. Most of them, they are forced victims of this environmental.
Okay, please stay with us. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the upcoming climate summit, COP26, and what it might mean for Nigeria and Africa. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, ahead of the COP26 Climate Summit, which starts on Sunday, we are today looking at one of the big questions that's confronting nations that rely on the income from fossil fuels. How can the structure of their economies be protected in the future without that income? Well, Nigeria, of course, Africa's biggest exporter of oil and heading towards massive production of gas, the consumption of which around the world is partly responsible for driving climate change and global warming. So is the Nigerian government willing or able to navigate its way and the country out of the oil industry and into greener, less carbon heavy energy sources? And Ronke Olubamishe, who is from the Environment Facility of the United Nations Development Programme, is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us.
Thank you.
And Nigeria has just announced a pledge to reduce carbon emissions by 20% by 2030. It said it could do a lot more if it gets international support. It could reduce emissions by as much as 45%. Are you encouraged by that?
I am encouraged if we can put actions to what we say. I am encouraged, and with regards to having international support, I am still of the opinion that there's so much that we can do within here. And another thing that I believe is if you are going to get support from any country from outside, I think it is important for us to also be able to show what we have been able to do or what we have been able to achieve
on our own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I am happy to say that I was part of the National Council on Environment that finished just last week. And I mean, of course, the Minister of Environment was reeling out the achievements of the ministry. Very good. And I think also recently they have launched the climate change policy, which is a good step in the right direction.
Right.
So I can be optimistic for Mr. President to say, okay, we are going to do this because of some of the things that have been done by the people in charge of it. And so that is on the national level. And also what other bodies are doing, especially like my office, what other bodies are doing. We work directly with communities, and then we have, for example.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to tell us a bit about your environment facility and the UNDP and what you're doing in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. The Global Environment Facility, I mean, as the name implies, will support environmental projects, and the GEF, of course, for short, the GEF is the largest funder of environmental projects all over the world, and so you have projects in the countries, you have projects across countries that is being supported. And then the one that I coordinate in Nigeria is the small grant of the UN, of the GEF, that is implemented by the United Nations Development Program. And to date, we have supported over 170 environment projects in communities in over 200 countries.
Give us an example of some of those projects.
Okay, we have supported climate change projects, and they are you see, when the GEF small grant was going to start, it didn't start immediately in Nigeria. The reason was like, okay, the fund that is being provided is so small. It's the maximum for a regular project is like $50,000 US, and so it was like Nigeria is too big for that. But you discover that there are people in the remote communities that if they get this so-called small amount, they can go places.
Yeah, but what are the sort of things that they're doing to reduce sort of global warming?
Okay, all right. We have projects that target felling of trees, for example, for firewood. We have projects that encourages the women or the communities to reduce the use of firewood, for example. The reduction of firewood does not, it's actually not so much a contribution.
But if they're not using firewood, what are they using?
Well,
gas or kerosene?
No, not gas, not kerosene. The idea is that we can't totally eradicate the use of firewood, but you can reduce the rate at which it's being used, and then just to promote efficiency of the firewood. So whereas where somebody will use 10 sticks to cook before, they can reduce it to as little as 3 sticks.
Yes, I see what you mean.
Exactly. So that is one of them. We also support renewable energy, where we get communities who are, especially we target communities that are off-grid, that are not connected to the national grid, and then they provide them with the solar equipment for them to be able to have access, so that it reduces their use of kerosene, petrol, and firewood. And so we have that. We have projects that support another project is the one in Bauchi State, just trying to remember, where we train the people on how to do efficient irrigation method. So they make this pot that is porous, and then it reduces the amount of the wastage when they do irrigation. And so with this, they are able to improve on their land. They are able to plant.
It's almost like a cultural, a huge psychological shift.
Exactly.
So that they start to think in a more efficient way.
Many of them, when you get to the communities, they think that they don't have a choice. But by the time we introduce choices to them,
that's very interesting.
Okay, we never thought
but that's on a micro. That's on a micro level. On a macro level, the big problem in Nigeria, for example, is obviously fossil fuels. I mean, Nigeria depends on oil, and it needs that oil to fund development and its economy. It's also, a big problem is also gas flaring, isn't it? I mean, because, the experts are suggesting that as long as gas flaring continues, Nigeria is unlikely to meet that target of 20% emissions reduction by 2030. What's your view on that?
That view is correct. And I am also happy when you mentioned that Mr. President made a pledge. Hopefully, if that pledge is backed up by corresponding action, I don't believe that we cannot do away with fossil fuel in Nigeria. I don't believe it. It is just for us to think, like you were talking about the paradigm shift in communities, the same way with the government. If we think that we want to make a change, we can make a change.
Yeah, but the problem is that the president may be saying all these nice things ahead of COP26, but clearly oil exploration is still at the heart of the Nigerian economic model. And investment is still being made into further oil exploration. It's not being reduced, it's actually being increased.
It's not being reduced. It's actually been, well, that is why I said that let me be optimistic about Mr. President's pledge. Because if he has said that, then it means I want to believe that he has seen that there is a possibility and that there is a solution that we can actually latch onto to be able to reduce our use. It is not that it's going to stop abruptly, just like that.
No, I understand
but
that,
I think there is a lot of technology improvement that is coming on that we can latch onto. There are people in Nigeria who are making electric cars already.
And that brings me, that's a good point. That brings me to the issue of energy, because Nigeria, very energy poor with intermittent power supply. Does that crisis provide an opportunity to replace diesel, for example, oil and gas driven power supply with cleaner energy? Some of the things that you're doing, you know, solar, and if the funding is there?
If the funding is there, if the political will is there, talk of solar system, for example. Nobody pays for the sun in Nigeria. All we need to do is get the equipment to track this.
We still have to maintain the equipment.
And the maintenance, whatever, is also not that expensive. Immediately you buy it and you get a very good battery, because of course there are other fake ones and the substandard ones. If you get a very good battery, for the next, the panel I have in my house, for the next 25 years, I have, since for the past 7 years, I have not maintained it. All I do is pour water on it to wash it away. Wow. So we have what it takes if we are really serious.
So it's got to be the political will and some of the funding. Okay. I want to thank you very much indeed. It's been an education. Ronke Olubamishe is from the Environment Facility of the United Nations Development Programme. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.